Welcome to Focus on Scholarship. I'm Jacqueline, Associate Dean of Graduate Education and Research, and your host for today's session. Our goal at graduate school and university libraries is to bring a focus and awareness to the exciting scholarly and creative achievements of our academic community. Our guest today is Dr. Jacqueline J., an associate professor in the Department of History at Eastern Kentucky University. Dr. J. received her PhD in Egyptology from the University of Chicago in 2008. The same year, she joined the faculty of the History Department at EKU. She has published numerous journal articles and conducted many presentations, and is currently writing a book on the relationship between oral storytelling and written fiction in ancient Egypt. Welcome to our program, Dr. J.
Thank you.
Please tell us about Egyptology and specifically your research.
When people think of Egyptology, they tend to think of Indiana Jones and really exciting archaeology. And that's definitely part of it. We have to dig up material before we can analyze it. But I must admit that most archaeologists that I know focus more on pots these days as opposed to gold. And my own focus is with the textual material. We have to translate things before we can analyze them. For my dissertation, I looked at storytelling and the way stories in Egypt changed from the earliest stories dating to about 1900, 1800 BC to the latest stories about 2,000 years later, written during the time when the Greeks and the Romans ruled Egypt, about 300 BC to 200 AD. That's a huge span of time, and so the grammar of ancient Egyptian changed, and I looked at the way that change in grammar affected the change in how stories were told. For this recent project, I'm focusing on those tales at the later end of the spectrum, which were written not in the formal hieroglyphs, which most people think of when they think of Egyptian scripts, but in a more cursive script called Demotic, not to be confused with demonic, although it is really difficult to read. It's a script that the Greeks gave a name to, Demotic spelled D-E-M-O-T-I-C, from the same root as democracy, meaning of the people. When the Greeks got to Egypt, they saw that there was this more cursive everyday script. And the word demotic, of the people, is a bit of a misnomer because even at that point, very few people in Egypt could read and write. So it was still something that the scholarly elite were doing, writing stories down. So there must have been a very significant tradition of oral storytelling for the illiterate. And I'm looking at the written stories that we've got to try to find hints at that oral storytelling tradition. In general, I'm really interested in the role that stories and storytellers played in ancient Egyptian society.
So how did you become interested in ancient Egypt and the written and oral stories of Egypt?
It seems to be one of those things that catches people when they're really young. When I got to my undergraduate studies, my graduate studies, I found a lot of my fellow students had become interested in the topic at a young age. For me, my social studies teacher in grade 6 did a unit, and that was it. And initially, I was fascinated by the kings and the queens and the stories about them. When I got to my studies, I found that the languages, the hieroglyphs, and then the cursive scripts were fascinating, and I've always loved fiction, and so this was a way to put together my love of fiction and storytelling and ancient history.
So how does this research and study that you do relate to your teaching? How does it inform your teaching?
I've been really fortunate. When I came to Eastern Kentucky University, they hadn't had somebody doing ancient history. There was an American historian who taught a survey class of Greece and Rome because he was really interested in that topic, but they didn't have a specialist, so I've been able to create a number of my own courses. I teach a survey class on ancient Egypt, which I'm currently teaching and is one of my favorites. It seems to be very popular amongst the students. I also teach a survey class of the ancient Near East, which looks at ancient Mesopotamia, Persia, Israel, Turkey. The specialized courses that I've designed for the history program and the needs of the program include a term paper class for upper division majors on women in the ancient world. And I've really enjoyed looking at the material for that, and someday would like to write a book on that topic, comparing the lives of women of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and ancient Greece.
So how do you get your students involved? Are there students involved in your research, and how do you get them interested in ancient history, especially outside the classroom?
It's difficult to get students involved in my personal research because it's so based in the languages. But what I've been able to do is take students on field trips to museum exhibits. My first year here, there was an exhibit at the UK Singletary Centre, and we went up to see that, which was wonderful. And last year we took several members of the History Club at the History Department to an exhibit on Cleopatra. My students in the term paper class, several of them took their term papers, and I worked with them to help them prepare it for a conference presentation at the Phi Alpha Theta Regional History Conference, which was a really good experience for them, I think. And one of those students is now revising that paper for publication in a journal for the honors program.
Oh, that's great. This research activity that you do and the scholarly activity, does that get you involved or interested in other professional activities? How do you relate your professional activities?
We have a conference every year. The main organization of the discipline is the American Research Center in Egypt. And through that and through my graduate studies at the University of Chicago, I became involved in a project looking at graffiti in the Valley of the Kings, which has been very fascinating, and that's something that's taken me to Egypt for 3 summers for a 6-week project, working with 2 other professors. The tombs were built in the New Kingdom, the period of about 1400 BC to 1100 BC. They were robbed almost immediately, and so by the time of the Greeks and the Romans, tourists started going in, just like tourists do today, and they would tend to scratch their names on the walls. Some of these tourists were Greeks or Romans, some of them were ancient Egyptians, so we've been looking at the names that are written in Demotic, in this ancient Egyptian script, in order to get a sense of why they were there. It doesn't seem to have been destructive. They were wanting to tie themselves to that sacred space, and it gives us a sense more of what the regular Egyptians were like and what they valued.
Sounds like a very enriching, wonderful research activities. How do you balance such a busy life, academic life, especially summer trips that you just mentioned, with the rest of your life, family activities and family responsibilities that you have? And especially I would like to hear, what advice would you have for new faculty joining EKU?
It is a challenge, and it seems to be something that my colleagues in the history department deal with in different ways. For me, I find that I do work fairly well in small blocks of time. A lot of scholars need several hours at a time to feel productive, but if I can get at least half an hour of work in during the semester on my own work, in addition to the teaching and the service, then by the end of the semester I've been able to do at least something, and then really making the most of those summers to work on the research, and also that really refreshes you for coming back to teaching in the fall.
Thank you very much. That's it for this edition of Focus on a Scholarship. Please join us next time as we continue our series of webcasts celebrating the scholarly and creative achievements of the faculty and staff at Eastern Kentucky University.